Okay, great. 6:05, so I think we'll get started. Um, my name is Blake Glatley. I'm a fourth year PhD student in the combined program in education and psychology. I'm also a STAR mentor. And Kian?
And hello, everyone. Good evening. My name is Kian. I'm a third year PhD student in social work, and I'm also a STAR mentor within the psych department as well.
Yeah. And it's kind of the title here says, today we'll be talking about kind of what you can do with the PhD in psychology. We've got a host of panelists who have been very kind to share their time with us tonight. So thank you again to all of you for joining. But kind of before we get into talking about some of that, we want to just kind of outline a few things. Um, Specifically what, life after the PhD looks like and kind of the pathways that folks can take, specifically pathways that aren't academic. I think when we think of professor, or when we think of PhD, we think of professor, but it's actually not the case. You can kind of go a lot of different directions with that. So kind of want to give you a little spiel about what that looks like, and then we'll kind of jump into our panel. So I'll let Keon take it away.
Yeah, thank you, Blake. So, as Blake kind of mentioned, the most straightforward path of a PhD that you may typically think of is being a professor, and specifically doing research or teaching at a university or in a university-based setting. And so, this is a job that you typically have a lot of flexibility within your work. You can do your own individual research. You have your own potential lab, depending on the different discipline that you're within. And then you can also kind of think about different work that you want to do that is meaningful to you, for example. So my advisor, her name is Daphne Watkins, and she does work focused on Black men and Black men's mental health. So a very niche topic, but that's something that she specifically has written and has done scholarship on for the past 2 decades now. And so that's kind of the traditional path that you would think of. But there are many, many others that a PhD can allow you, for you to do. And that's something that even as a third year, halfway through my program now, I'm learning about the different pathways and different areas that I can go into. And so a PhD, as kind of mentioned, it prepares you for various careers in terms of the transferable skills that you're able to develop, everything from project management to in-depth research, learning various different methods and methodology, and being able to present and communicate to a large group of audience about a very complex topic and break it down and disseminate it into a topic that anyone can understand or the general public. And so this is something that the PhD kind of offers, not only that's valuable within an academic setting, but also highly valuable outside of academia as well. And so, as we kind of mentioned, what can you do after a PhD? Uh, Really anything, essentially. So everything from staying within the academic setting and conducting academic advising or being in an administrative role, user experience, that's like working with Google or Facebook or Amazon, market research, journal editing, also being a researcher within academic think tanks, government and policy institutes, data analysts, which we have a few panelists who can speak to that, nonprofit organizations as well, along with if you're a clinical PhD in clinical or counseling psychology, actually practicing therapy within a hospital or a mental health setting as well is another pathway. And I'll go ahead and pass it on to Blake.
Yeah, so just to kind of illustrate some of these different pathways that can be taken, we have here a chart that is from 2011, and I'm sure this has kind of changed, but not too much. You'll see about a quarter of folks who have PhDs end up back in university spaces, which, really does contribute to the kind of thought that like a PhD does have to be, academically oriented and sets you up for an academic career. But you can see more, about 75% of these individuals are ending up in different industries. So hospital health services kind of follow that space. So if you're thinking about, for instance, a clinical PhD, you could obviously go back into teaching in a higher education space. But more often than not, too, you might see those individuals going into more medical fields, working in hospitals or clinical spaces, really providing back to the community that they're serving. We then see that government or medical centers make up the next bulk. And that's really, again, kind of providing spaces in which your expertise can really lend itself to shaping policy or, again, more practice. So, speaking for my field, I'm in education and psychology. Um, a lot of government policy needs to be informed by the expertise that we're kind of gaining in these spaces. So I know for a lot of industry that comes out of educational psychology, it might look like things like supporting legislation that is going to better promote students' experiences in schools, children's development in school spaces and out of school spaces. So that's really common. But again, if you're going more the clinical route, you might also see yourself in these kind of more VA medical centers or government supported spaces that provide clinical support to populations of need. Then we see more business and nonprofit or other educational institutions. Medical school and independent practice is really making up the last kind of third of this distribution. So again, there's a lot of different ways that you can kind of take your PhD and apply your expertise to a range of different fields. Um, and there's a broad kind of list of resources that you can use in order to find these types of opportunities. So we have a few here. My IDP, Individual Development Plans through Science Careers. Really recommend taking a look at this website. It provides kind of a whole host of opportunities that are regularly updated and kind of support an understanding of what you can actually do with the PhD. I see in the audience we have quite a few current PhDs, some names that I recognize, some names that I don't recognize, but knowing that they're PhDs, and it's great to see you all joining here today. So this is a really good resource that you can use as you're kind of entering your third, fourth, fifth year and trying to figure out what a career option might look like for you. But then for students who are in their undergraduate education or thinking about PhD and are joining today, this is another, again, a resource you can kind of use to just get a broad understanding of what these qualifications can kind of set you up for. Um, so yeah, I really highly recommend looking at that. And because I believe we have, it looks like we have three of our four panelists here. I think we can kind of jump in to that. I know we're a little early, Cindy, but it's late, and I don't know if rambling is the best option here for everyone to kind of.
Okay,
That sound good?
that's fine.
Okay, cool. So yeah, today we have four alumni of the various psychology PhD programs joining us. We have Dr. Katie McCunn, Dr. Karthik Ganesan will be joining in a little bit, Dr. Kyra Phillips, and Dr. Madeline Quirk. And I'm going to pin them all here in the Zoom so that we can actually see them. And if you don't mind, just going from left to right, introducing yourself, kind of telling us a little bit about your time at the University of Michigan, what you got your degree in, and where you're at now, would be much appreciated.
Left to right, like on the slide. So I start.
So,
Okay. Hi, I'm Katie. I just got my PhD in May in cognition and cognitive neuroscience. Thanks, Cindy. And then I was a postdoc for a little bit in my lab, and now I'm a clinical research scientist at Humana, which is a health insurance company, for those who didn't know.
I'm Kara. I got my PhD from the University of Michigan in the biopsychology area in 2019. I can't believe it's already been that long. Um, and my work now, I work at Explico, which is a scientific and engineering consulting work, and I get to work with a lovely Maddie as well. And we do work related to, which I'm sure we'll talk more about, but kind of litigation support. And so we get to talk to lots of lawyers.
Yeah, I'll just tag onto that. I'm Maddie. I got my PhD in the cognition and cognitive neuroscience area last summer. So I've been had about a year and a half now at Explico with Kira as a human factor scientist. And yes, we will get into all of that as well. And it does look like Karthik's here, just so everyone knows. So there we go. Yeah.
Oh,
I am here.
Okay.
Thanks, Maddie.
Yep.
Like Maddie and Katie, I am from the CCN area as well, cognition and cognitive neuroscience. I finished my PhD in 2022, so about 3.5 years. I am currently working at Uber as a data scientist, and I work a lot with marketing psychology.
great. Yeah, thank you all again for taking the time out of your presumably very busy days to spend it with us. I'm gonna actually stop sharing my screen now, just so we can kind of see you all and chat with you. The way we're gonna kind of do this is Kiana and I have a list of questions that we're gonna kind of go through and just kind of open it up broadly to all four of you. And then we're gonna leave a little bit of time at the end to open things up to the rest of the crowd to cover anything that we might not have touched upon. So to kind of get us started, I'm going to just ask, how did you end up in this career after your PhD? And it's kind of clear what your education path was, but how did you kind of end up here?
Should we just go in the same order that we introduced ourselves in? You're going to call us out like Dave does.
You're more than welcome to, or you can kind of, if anyone's super inclined to take the question, feel free to unmute and take it. But yeah, if we want to start with Katie, we can.
Okay. Yeah, we should get Dave and have him choose. So I feel like this is a hard question. I'm not really sure how I ended up in my job. I had a background in healthcare, so I kind of knew when I graduated. I decided I wanted to go into industry. I was probably going to do something health related. And I applied to this job. They were looking for a psychologist, and I met everyone, and it just kind of ended up that I ended up here. So, yeah, looking for people with research skills and that kind of thing.
So in my background in biopsychology, I used rodent models, and that is nowhere near what I do today. So it felt like a big pivot. I got a little lucky and kind of in terms of like the network that the university had, where a former alum had come and given like a job talk and talked about his role and had an opportunity to take resumes and spoke about this work. And so I spoke with him, gave him my resume, and kind of interviewed from there. And that's kind of how I ended up in this field. So I got very lucky in that regard. I think one thing in terms of yes, I fell into it, but it was also helpful to know some like keywords that were adjacent to like not just psychology, but like human factors as a term or ergonomics, things that are adjacent to what psychology means in the kind of a broader context. And that was what I used to be like, oh, I'm going to go to that one because they use human factors in the title to gauge my interest.
Let's see, how did I end up here? It also sort of, I feel like you like fall into these things a lot of the time. And so I I had heard of human factors in this industry and had started doing some transportation psychology research towards the end of my PhD. So I was sort of in this world of looking at how passengers feel in vehicles and specifically autonomous, but a lot of the research is all over the place there. And so I was getting into this sort of niche domain, and learned that there's this litigation support role where we are basically brought in as experts and you testify to a lot of the human behavior, cognition, perception involved in people getting into accidents or finding creative ways to hurt themselves. Um, and I went to a panel at Psychonomics conference that was for academic to industry, and one of the panelists was someone in academia. You like have relations to people based on who your advisor is, right? So he was one of my advisor's sort of most famous students, Steve Yantis's students, who basically had like the same PhD study domain as I did, and he was in this field of human factors consulting. And so we started chatting afterwards about how much my field, which when you're in the PhD, it can feel a little abstract. You're sort of studying these really broad ideas that are really specific to like a computer task or something versus the applied nature a lot of times industry can be, or at least our role is. And so he showed me that my stuff can really apply into this world in this domain. And I thought it was really interesting. So a friend of mine sent me my the job posting I ended up applying to that she found on LinkedIn, because I was interested in this realm. And here we are.
So my path slightly unconventional from the remaining three wonderful panelists. I came in to the PhD from an industry role. I was working for Deloitte Consulting. I was a consultant. And when I came into the PhD, I was very certain that I was going to become a professor. And midway through it, I started having doubts, given how awesome you need to be a professor. I wasn't sure if I wanted to do that. There were a lot of doubts about being that awesome. And so I started looking out at, okay, what is out there in the industry apart from what I'm already used to. So I managed to find an internship midway through just to see, okay, pre-PhD, without a PhD, or working in industry, how was it? And midway through 3 years after a PhD, let's get back and get a feel of how it is. And I realized that even knowing that, oh, this person is from a PhD program, I did not even graduate at that time, right? Like I was just entering my 4th year. The amount of respect you received was insane. So honestly, that was one of my main motivations to actually get into industry again, given that I don't need to be as awesome to get into industry. You still need to have your skill sets, but that's what motivated me to, again, get into an industry job. And while I was graduating, the job market had absolutely tanked. There was no job openings anywhere. I actually had a return offer from my internship place, which was Anthem, another health insurance company. But they rescinded that offer because they basically closed all the recruitment cycles. So I was left without a job at that time, and I had to go get a job. So I reached out to my previous team where I was working before my PhD, and thankfully they were happy to have me back. So that's how I again ended up there. But I actually ended up 2 levels above what I was before my PhD. So I entered in at a higher level doing different type of work because the PhD helped me build a lot of good skill sets that was in demand. So which also helped in increasing the level at which I joined. So that's how I got in a job after my PhD. And then after a couple years, I decided, okay, that was done for me. And I found another job. And right now I'm at Uber. I'm a staff data scientist. I work a lot with end-to-end marketing campaigns. So identifying marketing psychology, but not for customers, for big businesses, how big businesses behave and how do you market to them, which is very different from how you would market to individuals. So that's what I do right now.
So I do want to jump in and say I know all of these people and they are in fact very awesome, but as well as very modest apparently.
Thank you all for answering that question. I think Karthik, you kind of ran into the next question that we were going to go into. But so we kind of talked a little earlier about the like a professor or being in academia and kind of that path. But could you guys all explain, I guess, your role or your a day in the life, essentially, what it looks like working at Uber or at Humana or Explico? Because I think it's very different from what you would expect in the academic space. So just to give panelists an idea of what that looks like. And also, if any guests want to jump in and ask questions, please feel free to raise your hand or just jump in. This is a space for all of you.
I can go in first. You called me out by name. So I can take that. I'll give you two different perspectives. One was with my previous company with Deloitte and now with Uber. So with Deloitte, it was a consulting firm. So you work with multiple clients, which is actually one place where I see a lot of PhDs and psychology grads end up in, or starting from bachelor's, master's, PhDs. I see a ton of psych grads in a place like Deloitte. I've also interacted with Accenture, KPMG, everywhere you see a ton of psych grads. So that's one place where you guys may want to look for jobs, and they're always looking for people, especially in social psych or cognitive psych or biopsych, where stats skills are valued. So you can go there. Talking about a day in the life. So consulting is one field where you're constantly working with different clients. So one day you're working with, so my last few clients were NVIDIA, Disney, and Lyft, which are in three completely different fields or domains. And most often, like 99% of the times, they come to you, they tell you there is this dirty data set, we need to clean it up and find some insights from it. That's it. That's the mandate you get. And because you're a PhD, a lot of times what happens is nobody asks you questions because they think you know everything. And that is a double-edged sword because you need to actually keep up to that expectation. They don't ask you questions, but then if you don't get to them at the end of the day or at the end of 2 days, they're going to be like, this person, I doubt his credentials. I mean, they don't say it, but of course you can see it in their face. So there's a lot of onus on owning things. And when I said at the end of the day or end of 2 days, that's literally how fast they expect you to do things. It's all super fast, super quick. There's a new thing coming up every day, every couple of days. You're constantly churning results, and there's no dearth of work. So you keep getting things at the start of your day, and you have to send out results at the end of the day. So that's what I was doing at Deloitte. And with Uber, it's sort of different. They generate a lot of data, of course. So you have petabytes of data that you have to go through. And a lot of times those data is going to be messy. And a day in the life of Uber is sort of, you have a very broad mandate. It's like a PhD topic, actually. They'll tell you, we need to increase marketing reach by X%. They will not tell you like, what does it mean to increase marketing reach? So you need to get deep into identifying what exactly it means. And what that involves is reaching out to stakeholders. And you would not know who the stakeholders are. So you have to research on, okay, who do I need to reach out to? What questions do I need to ask? You do your research on, okay, what is the background of this? How do I get to this problem, etc. And that's where your PhD training comes in, because that's exactly what you do in your dissertation. You just jump in not knowing what is what, but you have the skill sets to research about those things. You know how to get your literature, you know what exactly to look for in your literature. You're not going to read like a 200-page book about everything. You know exactly which chapter to look for, which pages to look for. So I think that's a valuable skill that you can actually carry over to any job that you have. So that's pretty much the day in the life of, for me, like reaching out to people, understanding what the problem statement is, defining the problem statement. The actual work itself is maybe 20% of my time. The remaining is defining the path to the actual work. And of course, guiding junior team members and helping them solve the problem. So if you are solving like 10 subsections of a problem, you delegate 9 of those to your juniors, and you're overseeing how they're implementing it and making sure they're doing the right things, and then integrating all of them together. So yeah, that's pretty much what I do on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah. So, and my job, I just started my job a couple weeks ago. So I'll give a general, like what other people at my job do. But we work on a clinical analytics team, and we really do research on like how to improve people's healthcare. So what my job is, even just a few weeks in, is I was hired to help with some of this behavioral health psychology related stuff. And so part of my job is to actually do lit review and meet with people and talk about what has been done in the past. And the goal is for me to decide what our next project is going to be and set that up. So very research PhD relevant. There's lots of people on my team who are setting up studies with many different projects going on. It is also kind of like what Karthik was describing, that you have to meet with people. So a lot of your day ends up taken up by meetings with your team and meetings with your stakeholders who have these different questions they want you to answer. Very little of your day actually goes to like doing your research. But we move not really hugely fast. Like we have projects that have been going on for years that are like big clinical trials, and then we have shorter projects, but we have deadlines that are more on the scale of months than days. So kind of similar to a PhD so far.
I'll get us started, Kira, and then you can tack on. Um, so I guess one of the things I was also looking for when I was looking for an industry job was something that had differences day to day, that was not like me sort of just tied to a computer at all times. Um, and I'll get into that into a second, but a bit of a background of what we do is we are our manager, and Kira's getting into this as well, is an expert witness. And so he testifies in personal injury litigation cases, again, like I said earlier, about a lot of times like the relevant literature that supports typical human behavior, decision making, what would have been visible to, there's all the buzzwords of a reasonably alert and prudent individual. It's sort of the legal jargon tied up in a lot of our analysis. Um, but we get then all of these case materials from attorneys. So we're consultants and we work with attorneys as clients on these cases. And we get all their case materials. And so there's a good portion of our time that's spent reviewing these case materials. It's going to be reading depositions of people involved or witnesses to an accident, um, or of a company saying how things are typically run or who should know what information to prevent injuries with large machinery or something like that. And so it's reviewing materials, it's reading the legal documents. So the complaint, someone who's brought the lawsuit, what are they alleging happened? What like crash reports, basically like anything the attorneys are going to be also reviewing in their case that could be relevant. And so there is a lot of that computer review side of things. And so it's synthesizing material to get it to basically a point where you have summary documents of all these thousands of pages so that our testifier doesn't need to have to necessarily read every single page to get the gist of what's going on. And then a lot of the other time is spent reviewing literature. And so it's looking for relevant literature that supports some analysis that we're putting forth to support this case. So the literature is going to underline a report that we put together most of the time. And the report is sort of like academic writing. And so there's a lot of the skills from a PhD that really, really, really support our job here. And so we're putting together these reports, we're using the literature to support it, we're doing background sections on the visual system and how perception works and how attention works, and then applying it to the case facts and the details and the argument you're stating that's going to end up basically in these bulleted opinions, that sort of summarize our whole role in it. So it's a lot of analysis. And then in the process of all of that can also be inspections, which is really fun. Sometimes they're stressful. But it's nice to like get out of the office every so often when it's nice out. Cold, not so much. But we get to go to like subject sites. If there's a vehicle incident, then you can go basically take pictures of the roadway, and just confirm like details and say that you've seen it yourself. or a vehicle that was involved, and you take all sorts of pictures, specs of it and whatnot, machinery, all that jazz. So seeing it in person is sort of a big part of this job as well. So it just adds a little variety, which is kind of fun. Um, but so day to day, it kind of depends. It's material review. It's a lot of client communication. A lot of phone calls to clients. Um, Maybe less like meeting stacked than it sounds like you guys might be. Well, I guess until you are our manager, who unfortunately is very meeting stacked. But yeah, I don't know. So it varies, which I like a lot. Okay, that's it for me.
That was great. And yeah, I agree. There's a lot of variability. And I like to think of our role kind of in either support or as we go to be testifiers as like we're trying to provide context to what we call a trier of fact. So that could be a jury, it could be the judge, mediator, the attorneys who are trying to settle this, figure it all out. And so, kind of most of our day is like we're collecting data. So, that's either through this material review, what information is already available, or if we're going to an inspection, what does the product someone was using look like? What does the area look like? What does the vehicle look like? It's working with lots of other people who can figure out other things for us, right? Like I can't talk about the physics of a car crash, but there are other people who do, and we get to work with them a lot and very closely, and that's always interesting and important. They like lay this foundation, and then we get to talk about how people then work within the physical environment. And so then like once we've collected all of this data and have this input from other members, we're comparing it then to what the literature says, as Maddie says, to like what is a typical person? What do people usually do or what are they capable of doing? So, right, if we're driving, we want to say like you could see everything in front of you, right? And as hopefully a lot of us with psych backgrounds know that it's not possible for us to see and respond and perceive everything in our environment at one moment at all the time. And so there are attentional shifts and visual limitations. And so then our last step is then communicating that. So you'll go to a client and say, like, well, this, for most people would have been visible and they would have seen it and responded to it in this amount of time, or the opposite. And so then you're communicating those. So yeah, the day to day can vary a lot for all of those different tasks. And they kind of vary. And then one part that I think Maddie touched on a little bit with our manager is like you go and then you present, like essentially you're like doing a mini defense every time you go to be deposed or you're at trial. And so we get a lot of questions about like, is this right? Are you the right person to do this? Did you use the scientific method? There are qualifications that we need to use to establish that our work has been done within a like scientifically valid framework. And so those can also take up some time.
Great. Thank you. So some of you touched on this already, but what do you most enjoy about your job and maybe entwined in that, what is the most challenging aspect of your job? Uh, and yeah, we can maybe start with Katie.
Yeah. I didn't decide to go to industry until like pretty late in the game. I wanted to stay in academia, so I think part of the most enjoyable parts of my job are that I'm still coming up with ideas and doing research and writing my code to look at these different things. And that's all something that I wanted to keep doing. So I really enjoy that. I think, especially right now, being new, the biggest challenge is changing fields because when you're in academia and you've done your PhD and you're onto a postdoc, you're the expert in everything. And you're used to being the expert in everything and everyone coming to you for questions. And then when you change fields, you suddenly have so many new things you have to learn. And you have to kind of remember that you're not the expert anymore. And it's okay to not really know what's going on. And that's going to take time to learn. Um, so I think that's one of the hardest things about moving into industry, especially if it's not something that you did your PhD on. But yeah.
I will say that one of the things I like the most about my job, I really love our company. We have a lot of great people at our company, and so that's not necessarily the specific job. Um, but I really like everyone I work with. And with sort of like Kira said, we have a lot of different adjacent teams that might do like the biomechanics of an injury of the involved in the accident, or reconstructing the accident based on principles of physics. And so I learn so much from all of them, like in every conversation. And so that's one of the things I love the most is that you're learning so much. There's still so much to learn. Every case is so different. So I learn something new literally every day, probably. And so because you're always looking up, because they're always really random injuries. And so all of a sudden one day you're the expert on corn pickers and you know everything there's ever been about corn pickers and how they've been designed since the 1960s. Um, Other days it's like pillow factories or like there's just a lot of, again, really creative ways to hurt yourselves. So you just are always learning something different or what regulations are involved in some of these product designs and development and whatnot, or as things evolve in the sort of federal regulation domain, how that affects a lot of our casework and whatnot. And so I think that's really cool, really fun. A little bit of the added to the challenging part though, because you are constantly like on your toes. But I like that a lot and I appreciate that. It doesn't ever feel like you'll get stagnant. But one of the harder parts, I think, is that we are beholden to attorneys' schedules and their scheduling orders for their cases. And so sometimes they really don't contact us until they have like an oh shit moment and they have a week to get their reports in, and there's nothing you can do about that. If the case is taken, then you have 1 week to go through all the materials and put together a report. And sometimes that takes you past your into the evening, and it happens. Um, but that's one of the harder parts. I've sat in parking lots on Zoom calls with clients before writing a report, so that is one of the harder parts, I'd say.
I'll go next. The good part, so I usually end up seeing my work go live or being used in action. I really like that part, especially so with Deloitte, it was not as direct. You can see the effect of it at like the end of the quarter or at the end of the year in the financial reports or whatever. But that's not as exciting as currently with Uber. Like I do some change on the code base, and over the weekend when I'm ordering something, I can actually see the effect of what I did on the price change or the discount rates. I know exactly what the discount rate is going to be if I go to this zip code and stuff. So that's super awesome. You know that there are hundreds of thousands of people probably using whatever you just played around with. So that's really rewarding. But that also comes with a challenge where you have to fight your way to to explain to a larger team about why your way is the right way. So you have to come up with like a really, really strong hypothesis, really strong defense of whatever you did. And it's not going to be easy because everyone wants their name on it, right? So you need to be like really strong with your proofs and with your arguments of why your way is the best way. So it can become very heated because everyone is trying to climb up the ladder. So it's um, it's it's interesting how to navigate those things because there are a lot of ego clashes as well about, okay, this person came from Google, this person came from Microsoft, so they ran teams there, they have to get higher priority and stuff like that. So those kind of ego clashes are very common even for tiny things. So that part I don't really enjoy, but otherwise I think it happens everywhere. But otherwise, you can just chill and enjoy if you don't want to participate in all of those. That's also possible.
I think for me, I think Maddie touched on some of them. Yeah, the variability in the work that we do is really fun. And conjoined with the fact that we have external deadlines, which was, I think I didn't mention earlier, but something that I found or was searching for when I was looking after grad school. I in academia, things can be spread out. You're applying for grants, but that's kind of internally driven in a lot of ways. Like, when are you applying for them? Which ones do you seek out? The client tells you it's due now, and you almost zero wiggle room depending on the type of project. So it's something that it can be challenging, but I find really helps me kind of work through those things. And then also, I forgot, as part of our like day to day, because sometimes it varies depending on these deadlines, but we do have the opportunity to do some research. And so again, the variability in terms of like what we are able to do and the kinds of things, like to add to Maddie's corn picking pillow, like I've seen photos of the inside of a nacelle, which is the top of a wind turbine, which I never thought I would see the inside of. But now have more info on that works. I've learned about Alaskan longline fishing. So there are lots of opportunities there. And there is also kind of less direct, as Karthik was kind of mentioning, there is kind of a direct impact. You are kind of having an impact on how these cases, like, you don't have any control over it, but you're contributing to them and they have this real world outcome. And sometimes there are cases where like our findings can be communicated to someone who's like is their life has changed as a result of whatever this incident, and you can kind of explain how like it would have been very difficult for anyone to avoid what happened, and so that can have be very meaningful. In terms of challenges, I think kind of on the flip side of some of these deadlines, for me, like the idea of doing research in an academic setting always felt kind of inherently valuable. Like it had its own value. And sometimes when we do this work that is for company or like can be for companies or is part of this giant system, like it can be sometimes a little more soul crushing than I think for me being in an academic setting often felt like. But also there are limitations within that system as well. Um, but I still enjoy the work.
Thank you guys for that. The next question kind of follows up or builds on to what the conversation has kind of been so far. So what is your overall, what are the overall skills that you gained or tangible skills that you gained from your PhD that are most valuable in your profession now? And how did you even go about that process during your entire during the entirety of your PhD?
I'll start. Oh, um, one of the I say this all the time, actually, that one of the biggest things that you gain from your PhD is the ability to figure stuff out, and that I'm sure applies to literally all of our jobs. And so that's not the most like tangible skill, I guess, but it is. You have to identify a question, you've got to identify a hypothesis, and basically figure out your path to figuring that out. Read through the literature, know how to read through the literature, and synthesize that information into something that can be applied to the broader question to come up with a conclusion. And that is literally what we do for every case. And so that's one of those things that I think you realize after the PhD, that is one of that really is taken away from the PhD. And so I think I don't know if there was a ton for me along the way that I was like, oh, let me go and seek out these skills other than maybe like the coding, the technical skills. And I really liked coding. And so I took a lot of computer science courses while I was in my PhD as well. And I really enjoyed that. Because that's also one of the things I think along the way you associate industry with is, oh, if I'm going to go into industry, I need to have strong coding skills. I feel like that's probably a large majority of them, but I don't use my coding skills a lot here. I like that I have them because I can be snobby about R when people whip out SPSS. And I feel very strongly about that. It is a hill I will die on in my company. Um, but so I appreciate those technical skills. I just don't use them every day. So for me, it was a lot of the like broader research skills, and problem solving and critical thinking skills that have really applied to this job.
I'll add on to that. since Maddie spoke about the research skills and whatnot, I'll add on to what gets you in the door. Because I think for me, at least, I got a ton of interviews based on my paper credentials. So on paper, so when I joined my PhD, the reason I wanted to do a PhD was I wanted to get a good understanding of what perception is, how humans perceive things. And I thought there's going to be a lot of biology, a lot of neuroscience. But then as I got deeper into it, I realized none of it is going to happen without understanding of statistics at a deeper level. So I realized, okay, I can learn neuroscience or biology of perception and all of that. That's fine, but without statistics, all of that means nothing. So I started taking a lot of stats classes to the extent that I could have gotten a master's in applied statistics if I had extended the PhD by 1 year, which I did not want to do. And the reason I say this is because a lot of psych grads do not know you're actually eligible to get a master's in applied stats. So, but you have to extend your PhD by a year if you want to do that, which I did not know. I thought it was going to be done in 5 years. But what you can instead do, psych grads are eligible for this as well. You can actually convert that into a dual PhD. So my PhD says psychology and scientific computing, which is essentially psychology and computer science. So what you need to do is you have to look for MICDE, which is MICD, Michigan Institute of Computational Discovery and Engineering. It's a school within the computer science school of UMich. So you tell them you're from the psych program and you're interested in upskilling in statistics or computer science. There are different pathways, so you can choose one of the pathways. It's not a lot of work, to be honest. It's you take up like maybe one extra course every semester for the entire duration of your PhD, and your dissertation needs to have some component of statistics or computer science involved. So it's going to be a more extensive extensive dissertation as opposed to your regular psych dissertation. But you get a dual PhD, which is like psychology and scientific computing. And that actually gets your foot into the door of so many jobs which require a PhD in computer science, because you are technically allowed to say you have a PhD in computer science. So that's one skill on paper that has really helped me. And from the point of view of just acquiring skills itself, that also helped me because every semester I was taking a different course in, computer science or electrical engineering or statistics. So over 5 years, it adds up. So you end up learning really a lot without actually having the stress of like, oh, if I don't pass this course, I'm going to fail, because it's like an optional thing. So there's no pressure, but you end up learning a lot. So that's one valuable thing that I've gotten out of my UMich Psych PhD. If you want more information, actually happy to provide details about it if any of you are interested, because I know a lot of people are probably not aware of it.
Yeah, I definitely didn't know that. That's cool. I feel the same way as Maddie and Karthik. Like having coding skills and statistics skills and just the ability to go learn things and think is super, super important. And a lot of those you're going to get just by doing your PhD. I will say, I think, especially for me, like the job market didn't really get better since a few years ago. The way you talk about your skills is really important too. Like, and that's something that I think it just takes time to kind of learn, is you don't want to go into a job interview or even on your resume have like, oh, my dissertation was in XYZ, because they don't care. They maybe think it's interesting. I've been asked, but it's more about showing how you can use your skills in a way that they understand. Like we do things like, I used to do a lot of like clustering and latent profile analysis, but in my job now, it's called patient segmentation approaches. So learning those kind of things for certain jobs is useful just because they'll understand what skills you have easier, and that little bit is going to help you get more interviews if that's the path that you choose.
There is this whole overlap of like things that you learn and do in a PhD that exist in industry under completely different names. So absolutely, that was one of the things knowing I was going into industry was learning, okay, I do this and I know this, but what does that mean to them? And how do you translate that was a big part of that.
Yeah, you might hear Dave or June talk about um, signal detection theory. Signal detection theory is just minimum detectable effect in industry. So
We
same
use
thing.
signal detection theory all the time.
We
We do,
use
and yeah, sorry.
we we use minimum detectable effect. I was like, oh, what is it? Probably something new. And like, oh, okay, SDT.
Yeah, so I actually let me pipe in here with a question on that because also like the Natural History Museum just was advertising their program again. So would you guys suggest like if you're thinking that industry is a area you might want to go into, like to also maybe do some of the scientific communication trainings? So there's Relate, there's the one the Natural History Museum does, there's the MI Writers Group. Does that help with, sort of translating those things?
I can't speak to the programs themselves, having not done
Uh-huh.
them, but I imagine so. We work in a field where we are constantly figuring out how to translate the scientific research to the non-scientific community. So attorneys with like some understanding, but they often are self-deprecating and call themselves laypersons. And then also the jury when you get to that point. So certainly for our field, our company does a lot of like marketing training with us and communications training because we also work with a lot of engineers who don't do that in their fields as much leading up to their job. Um, and so there's a big emphasis on the scientific communications for us. So having that going into a field like this would certainly be helpful.
Thank you.
Yeah, I similarly can't speak to those programs either, but one of the things I was going to say in terms of communication and especially like what Michigan offers is a lot of teaching possibilities and a lot of opportunities for feedback while you're teaching and their courses that I found very useful. And so like teaching my own class like really gave me a lot of feedback and having someone sit in and tell me like this is what the students are getting or not. I think that was really helpful in kind of making sure I could communicate kind of bigger concepts to people who are just learning about them for the first time. I think I'll piggyback on that real quick is that one thing I learned after my PhD was that having friends go to other universities and work in postdocs and whatnot was that not all psych PhD programs are created in the same format. And so they don't all have to do teaching. They don't all have the same computational emphasis that the Michigan Psych program has. So seeking those opportunities out if you're somewhere that doesn't have that sort of built into the program would be a really good way to sort of keep with the field in other cohorts as well.
Yeah, and one thing I will say, just as a professor, and I think this is true no matter where you go, is don't necessarily rely on your faculty advisor mentor to know about all these things. Like we know what it was, at the university that we went to and got our degree, and we know what it was 10 years ago when we got our degree, but we may not know, like everything that is to go on. I will say, like, if those of you who are at Michigan do have questions, like I know about some of them here in part because I was an SAA for a while. So, I'm always happy to help you explore with that. But yeah, do some of that, use those PhD research skills for yourself as well.
I like how Cindy mentioned she got her PhD 10 years ago.
It was maybe a few more than that.
Great. Yeah, thank you. Again, some of you have already touched on this, but just to make it clear, work-life balance in your non-academic job compared to when you were a PhD student. What does it really look like? I know you hear the kind of stories of professors taking their work home with them pretty regularly. I think Maddie, you touched on that a little bit, doing reports in your car. What does it look like for all of you?
Well, since you called me out, I'll start. Um, I would say again, okay, there's the caveat we are beholden to these scheduling orders from attorneys. So that is where work-life balance here can be taken home. Um, but I definitely have more of a quote unquote work-life balance here than in academia because you sort of feel like you can turn it off when you leave the office, when you shut the laptop. Especially like the last couple years of grad school, last 2 years, dissertation time, you got a lot to do. And my dissertation was far longer than it needed to be. Sorry, John. And so that you were just always, I was always writing. I like was always on my laptop. I could always be doing something. I always should be doing something. Um, all weekends I was writing and working and probably did it to myself, but that's not the uncommon experience, I'd say, especially once you get towards the end. But you always feel like you can be doing something. And here it's more, or in my current role, I always could be doing something for sure. There's always work to be done. There always will be work to be done everywhere, but it doesn't have to happen right away, for the most part. Again, there are deadlines that sneak up on you, and sometimes attorneys they're calling you and you need to get something you like are missing each other, and it's just you got to figure out ways to get it done. And I don't mind it that much though because it doesn't happen that often, and I like producing a good work product and I like the client relations aspect of working with them. And so keeping up that like relationship is a really big part of our job. And our job is basically to make their job easier. And so being able to like provide that service, I don't mind as much. So it feels like there's almost like the more of that tangible benefit from working overtime, if you will, than maybe just like working to be getting work done.
Yeah, I'm gonna add to that since yeah, we work at the same company. I think also the tangible benefit is the pay. Like frankly, working overtime is much easier to do when you're paid to do it. But otherwise, yeah, I agree with Maddie. There are other reasons that you can balance that that I found easier than in grad school.
Think there are, sorry, Katie, go
You're
on.
good. You go.
Okay. I think I liked academia for some reasons, and I like working in non-academic settings for other reasons. In academia, I did not feel a sense of responsibility. I was very adventurous with what I wanted to do. So David Brang, was my advisor. He was awesome. So I would want to write some library in Python. He would not say no. He would just say, okay, that's it. And I would go down a goose chase for a couple weeks writing something which may or may not work. But he just gave me the freedom, the flexibility to just experiment and try out things, which I honestly won't be able to do right now. Like 2 weeks of going down a rabbit hole, no way in hell they're going to let me do that. So that level of freedom and flexibility is not available right now. I have to be more structured, and even if I want to experiment or if something is really piquing my interest right now, I'll have to be very careful about how I approach it. Whereas in an academic setting, I was like, just go do whatever you want, as long as at the end of the semester you're done with everything. You have a long leash to work off of, but which is also good right now. Like you are structured and nobody is asking you to like work after 5 or 6. You can just shut down your computer and nobody is going to question you, hey, why did you not respond to my email at 10 in the night? So my life is a 9 to 5 right now. I don't work after 5 unless some problem actually interests me. So that's good. In academia, it's possibly like your personal and work life are very intertwined. So if you like that, it's good. But otherwise, industry is cool that way. You are happy just shutting down after 5.
Yeah. I agree with all of that. What Maddie said did make me think of, well, what Maddie and Kira said made me think of one important thing that may be worth knowing, is that there's a difference between employees who are exempt and employees who are non-exempt. I will never get paid overtime, no matter how much I work, because I'm exempt. So that's something to keep in mind when you're looking for jobs, is that a lot of jobs that are like research scientist jobs like mine are paid salary, and you are not eligible for overtime pay. So worth looking into. That said, about like work-life balance, I really liked the research that I did for my dissertation, and I was really, really interested in it. And so I would work for a very long time because there was always another question and another thing to look into. And that can be fun and it can also be bad. But when you work at a company, and particularly like at a healthcare company, there's a lot of security. So like I don't have Microsoft Teams or any of the things we use to communicate or my email on my phone anymore. And so once my laptop is closed, nobody from my job can contact me until I turn it back on. And so that's kind of nice in a way because I'm not getting an email and feeling like I need to answer it. I just work my hours. I'm done at 5. I close my laptop and that's it for the day.
All right. The next question is, what is something that surprised you about your job, or what is something that other people are surprised about when they hear about your line of work? Because I'm pretty sure you get some interesting reactions when they hear a psychologist working at Uber or Humana or Splico. Not the typical perception of what a psychologist could look like.
Yeah, I can go first, probably because you again called me out, Uber. So the first thing, so a lot of people don't care that you have a PhD. Like they don't ask you for your credentials when they're interacting with you. But somehow they just figure it out. Just the questions you ask, just the way you talk, they almost always like, what's your background? Like that's a lot of times that question comes up, right? Because I don't do it intentionally. I just ask questions in a structured way, just the way you're trained to ask in a grad program. They just figure it out, right? Like they ask you. And I've seen it with other PhDs that I work with as well. They get asked that same question, right? Like, what is your background or whatnot? So when you say, okay, I have a PhD in cognition and cognitive neuroscience, for instance, they're like, what are you doing here? Why are you working at Uber? And then you have to explain them, okay, fine. Now I'm actually working with marketing psychology. It's like group behavior, which is nested behavior. It is basically random effects modeling, right? A lot of random effects of population nested within subpopulations. And I have explained it. Okay, that's exactly what my PhD was in actually. So how do neurons behave when they're looking at particular stimuli and how those stimuli interact with each other and whatnot. So when I look at the problem, it's so obvious to me. It's like, oh, this is just a random effects model, right? But when you are actually explaining it to them, their mind is just blown about like, oh, wow, how did you come up with that? I'm like, 5 years keep looking at the same thing. I can think about it in my dreams. But they don't see that direct translation of how your PhD can translate to actual work, but it does. In a lot of industries, you can actually translate your everyday task, like your t-tests that you run day in and day out is basically what A/B testing is. And it's, you do it in multiple times, like instead of calling it multi-comparison A/B testing, they call it multi-bandit or multi-armed A/B testing. So it is the exact same thing, right? So if you get into industry and then you see A/B tests or multi-bandit, multi-armed A/B tests, you'd be like, oh, okay, this is just something I've always done. So it's like, I think Katie mentioned it previously, you always are equipped with the skills. It's just communicating your skills in the language that the other person understands. They don't care for if you studied, I don't know, memory retention between older adults and younger adults. I'm not taking a swipe at you, Cindy. They don't care about it, but they care about, okay, how can I use it to increase the profits of my company? right? How are you going to be beneficial to them? So that's what they care about. So always think about it in that way, where you are able to translate your skill sets to an industry that you're interested in. I think that's the bottom line.
I think something that's, I'll do, this is sort of two questions. What surprised me about the job um, was actually how much of my literature and my actual specific PhD domain, in a little different, I think, than maybe the general industry role is I use so much of my literature from my PhD in our reports and our analysis. And so like one of the first reports I ever worked on, I was citing I brought in my main paper that substantiated a lot of my dissertation. It was so exciting. And so um and I didn't expect that. I didn't expect it to literally be like me summarizing papers I just spent 5 years with. In a report document. And what was fun about that, and what my manager said, was that we all come from slightly different domains. Sort of, a lot of us are psychology PhDs in one domain or another. And so he's like, it's fun that you guys all come in with your separate sort of domains, and then I get to learn a lot more because we hadn't been doing a ton of um, selective attention type literature review, and that was what my PhD was in. So I got to bring in all my fun papers, which was exciting, and did surprise me. And then I think one of the most common reactions whenever I explain what I do is people like not knowing that this is a job, and they're like, what do you mean? I would never have thought that that was something that existed." And so that's always kind of fun. And we always have crazy cases that make for good stories, or case videos that not all of the videos are, most of the videos are not fun, to be fair. But some of them are mildly entertaining. And so they make for good table stories sometimes.
Yeah, I think one of the things you have to get around when you tell other people about your job is always like that you're not a therapist. Um, Someone did ask me when I was interviewing for a job, they were like, what does that company need you for? Are you going to provide the employees with like counseling services? And I was like, no. But I think to me, what the most surprising thing about my job is that before I interviewed for it, I was kind of worried that my whole job was just going to be making the company money, potentially at the expense of the patients. Um, and that's not true at all. My whole team is actually, yeah, there's a component of it where it's trying to reduce costs, but it's through improving people's care. Like if someone comes back to the ER 2 weeks after they were just there, they're not receiving good care. So it's actually more about that than about the bottom line. And I think that's something you wouldn't necessarily know about healthcare if you weren't working in it.
Great. Thank you. So we have about 15 minutes or so left in the allotted time for the panel, and I wanted to see if anyone in the audience might have any questions that they want to ask our panelists here.
While the audience think about their questions, I just want to quickly, because it's, I think it's important. I don't know if it's a question it will be covered in, but I think one advice, very strong advice that I'll give all of you: do not get used to using AI, especially for coding. Write your codes, because I've been interviewing candidates, fresh grads. They're so bad right now. Like I used to interview them in 2022, 23. It was not that bad. 24 and 25, it's like, oh my God. It's not like they don't know what they're doing. It's just their muscle memory has gotten so weak, they just cannot write code anymore. And of course, your work is going to let you use AI, but your interviews are in person and they expect you to know the basics. So unless you have been constantly coding and constantly practicing writing code, there's no way you're going to pass that interview. Sorry for being blunt, but just make sure that your muscle memory stays intact for coding.
The same goes for writing as well. Using AI for writing, there's been so many issues, I think, just with like not grads not knowing how to write. And a lot of our job is writing. And you should be able to do most of that yourself because it also just lends to the critical thinking process. So be wary of AI, learn your stuff.
No, I think that's actually really valuable for people to hear because I think the yeah, I'll just go ahead and call it propaganda that you hear from the AI companies is like, oh, everybody has to get skilled in using AI, and if you don't know how to use AI, then then you won't get a job. But it sounds like you guys are actually the ones doing some of the interviewing and the hiring, and that your perspective on that is very different. So I think that's huge for people to know that.
Yeah, because it takes like 2 minutes to learn how to use AI to code.
Mm-hmm.
So it takes a lifetime of practice to actually understand if the code that the AI generates is wrong or not. It'll write 100 lines of code in 10 seconds or less. But out of those 100 lines, its accuracy would be 98%. Identifying that 2% is a skill that you actually will get only if you write your code.
I think it also lends to the work ethic of an individual is be having the commitment and wanting to put in the effort to contribute and to learn and to constantly be evolving. When there is an easy way out, says a lot especially when you're looking for candidates to grow and train and enter the company.
And I'm someone who has just about zero coding experience. So the coding hasn't applied to me, but I've even seen clients be like, I asked AI this scientific question about how fast someone would leave and they come up with this number. And I'm like, wait a second. So having that skill, relying on the skill of like looking into the literature, how to search, how to actually find the answer and be like, well, I'm glad you found that, but it's just not rooted in anything. So
Yeah, and to add like, the real learning the job example, like in my job now, I know a bunch of programming languages, but not PySpark, which is the one that I have to use for my job. And so my first project, they were like, okay, well, do you know this language? And I was like, no. Um, so as I'm writing the code, we have Copilot built in now. So it suggests code for you, which is fine, but it's usually not what you actually want it to write. So just the ability to actually be able to read the line of code and know what it's saying is super important because you can't just ask it and expect it to give you the right answer. So having the ability to think critically, like everyone has been saying, is one of the most important things. Like you can't rely on AI.
Hello. Thank you so much for being on this panel. Can everybody hear me well?
Mhm.
Okay. Yay. So I'm actually happy that you brought up the topic of AI and coding, and I'm just kind of curious more so during your grad years, when you really started learning these skills, whether it was before you entered grad school or whether it was that you really started developing these skills during grad school, and whether it was like through classes or also just for your own dissertation that you were able to really gain knowledge of these skills.
I had one class in undergrad, I think, that used R for statistics. And so that was my like one semester of very, very basic, use it, kind of lose it a little bit type entrance. And then early grad school, I started liking statistics more and also realizing how like necessary it is for everything that we do. And being able to explain and understand the statistics that others are writing about that you're going to need to use is so, so, so helpful. And so I started taking classes. You take an intro, most programs would have some sort of like, we had a psych statistics course. Um, and I think they give you the option often to use like an SPSS, which is point and click statistics versus R programming language. And so I did R because I recognized the benefit of sort of learning the language there. And once you sort of get a good grasp on one programming language, it's really that underlying logic that then is easier to apply to all the others. So really like getting pretty good at one language will then help you be able to branch out more. And so doing that earlier on helps to then just you keep getting to add to your toolkit. So R was sort of my Gateway and then Python. I took courses, so I wanted to get better at coding. Again, thinking knowing I was going into industry somewhat early in my degree, second year, COVID. Um, and so knowing that coding could have very well been a large part of an industry role, I did a lot of computer science courses that were on my own, that were not some of them like cross list, so you might get to cross list it in there somewhere as um, a required course or so, but I just sort of did them because I wanted to have the skills. So taking courses, there's summer classes too. I taught Bayesian statistics for 2 summers in a summer stats program that used a lot of programming. That was because I took the course and built a good relationship with the professor. So like there's opportunities, especially at a school like Michigan. There's so many different ways to learn these programming languages. And
I came in with some programming background from my previous job, but once I came in, there were two things that actually took me from maybe a 3 or a 4 to a good level. One of those was this textbook. I'm pretty sure you guys probably are using this for your statistics. It's Discovering Statistics Using R, Andy Field. It's one of the best books to learn both statistics as well as R. That was one which helped me a lot because I wanted to learn statistics, and this book, it literally translates all of your basic statistical theory into R code. So I coded up the theory and I know what the output is going to be. So I just practiced using this while also just coding up my actual dissertation work in MATLAB and Python. And there is another thing that actually really zoomed me ahead. That is this course, Stats 506. It's by James Henderson. I think he still teaches it. Yes, he does. So I'm looking at it right now. So his course is like the bomb. You have to take it if you want programming. I thought I knew programming and I took this course and I was humbled. And the professor is super awesome. He teaches it really well. And some people who took it with me, they came in with zero programming knowledge. And by the end of it, they were so good that it was scary. So I think this is one course that is like absolutely worth taking. It's not too much time either. It's like I don't know how he manages to do it. He just teaches it so well that you end up learning so much in one semester. And I think he also teaches another advanced programming course. So if you like this one, then you can take his advanced course. And those courses are surely like a stepping stone for you to do your own personal projects and then learn more with programming and stuff.
Karthik, I should have talked to you during my PhD. I'm learning so much that I wish I had known.
I'm always available.
That's too late now, but
Yeah, the other one I will recommend for people who maybe, if I mean, I know Karthik said, there were some people who went from 0 to 60 in this 506 course, but if you're feeling a little intimidated by that, I know School of Information has some really good intro Python courses too that a couple of my students have taken, really enjoyed and got a lot out of. So, if you're, a first or second year and you want to start that off before you do the 506, and do keep in mind, those of you who are in the PhD program, is post-candidacy, you can take a course this semester too.
that's what I did. I did the SI courses, I think in candidacy, because I wanted to add my Python skills. And I had basic Python, and so the first SI course was really easy. Kathy and I took that together, and we were like, okay, until like some of the last modules, but it was good to sort of refresh and get some of the like foundation again.
This is probably the course that Cindy is referring to, if I'm not wrong. So
Where
it's
are
a
you pulling
pretty
all these from?
Google. I remember. So this is a pretty good introductory course for stats and data science. It's not too advanced. So the topics look advanced, but they're actually like pretty introductory if you actually do hands-on. It's a good introduction before you take 506. Sorry if
There's
it's all
all
an information overload.
No, there's also, I think the one Cindy you might have been talking about was SI 506, Programming 1, the Intro to Python.
I think so. Yeah, it's the same. Yeah, I believe so. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the one I took too. I'll put that in the, yeah, I'll put that in the chat.
I'm saving this chat to use also as a resource for future students. So thank you guys so much.
I have a quick question if we still have time. Thank you all for all the panelists for sharing your insight. I'm just curious for those of you who've done like an internship during your PhD or a similar practicum, have you guys applied through the Rackham Internship Fellowship? And if so, would love to hear more about that experience.
Did you guys do an internship?
I didn't do an internship, but I did apply through the Rackham Fellowship for one. Um, but what I was trying to do was sort of create my own with a company I was interested in, which is an option through the Rackham Fellowship. Um, my timelines just sort of didn't work out in actually like getting that done, but I really liked the process of working with Rackham. They were really helpful. We had like specific meetings with one of the advisors there. That was specifically a grad student advisor, I believe, if I recall correctly. And it was nice. We would discuss like what are my goals, and so it was almost like it was grad student advising a little bit, and so it was nice to sort of um, workshop that a little bit, and they were really helpful with the process. But that's sort of all I can speak to on it.
I see. May I ask what does the timeline kind of look like? Like, for example, is it like a very short turnaround that you're able to kind of go through the process fairly quickly, or is something that you have to kind of plan long term, like year or a year and a half, so that it kind of aligns with both sides?
Because I was trying to create my own, it was something that was a longer timeline. So I needed to sort of work with the company to figure out what would have been available, how I would have got, because the benefit of that is that Rackham would be paying you. And so you
Mhm.
get the benefit of this company basically getting free labor, right? And so that's why there are the partner programs that companies that partner with the Rackham program. But doing like a regular Rackham, one of the already established partnerships, would be sort of a normal, probably start of winter semester type timeline. Things open up and then you're applying for summer. Um, Again, creating your own, you'd have to like have that established by the time you're applying for the grant and funding and whatnot. And so that one is depending on sort of the relationship with the company. I was like cold emailing one that I was interested in. So I was like creating a relationship from the ground up and then figuring out how I might have a place in there. And it just didn't have enough time to do that. So it depends probably on your specific circumstance, but normally it would be like the spring semester to, or the winter, whatever they call it, to the summer semester that follows.
That's really helpful. I'm just trying to think about like all the options that I could explore with all the resources here at Michigan. So yeah, just curious if that's something that people have experience with. So thank you.
There's also
And
like internships that companies will post too, I believe. And so like our company offers specific internships for usually master's students. Um, but I would look at like actual internship postings as well.
Yeah. So,
I
man. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Garthik. No,
So
go ahead.
I was going to say I got my internship by just applying, cold applying. So there are two different ways in which you can do it. You just pester recruiters on LinkedIn for internship job postings, or you go to the EECS department, the electrical engineering and computer science. They have a lot of postings, like physical postings, like printouts on the wall. I don't know if they still do it, but it used to be that way. And if they post it there, there's almost a certainty that they will definitely call you back if you're from UMich because they're specifically recruiting from there. So I used to, with Jesu, who was another grad student with me. She's a Cindy student, yeah. So
She's at Apple now.
she's at Apple, yeah. I've been talking to her actually. So she and I used to go around different schools like EECS and statistics, School of Information. There used to be these posters. We used to randomly write to them, and I got my internship through one of those cold emails. So you could try that actually.
I think I've seen some poster. I'm not sure if they're internship posting or job posting, but yeah, definitely worth trying. So thank you for sharing that.
Hi, I actually had a question about the STARS mentorship program. Are there any workshops adjacent to the session at all?
Adjacent to this session?
Yes, like
Um,
going into PhD programs and
Yeah, so we do have one in the winter as well. I mean, it's not as so we don't bring in the panelists from the outside in the same way because we do those live instead. But we do talk about a little bit about sort of like what the different career options are and sort of contrast, like, there's the professor life, and talk a little bit more in detail about what that's like, and then also explore like, if you want to do, some of these others, like what kind of preparation you should be thinking about. And if you are a mentee in the program, one of the things I really encourage people to do, and actually for the grad students on here too, like I don't know how many of you guys are aware of this, but there are a lot of skills that you can learn, and you guys all have access through Michigan to LinkedIn Learning and Coursera and so on. So if it doesn't work out for you in that semester to take the programming course, you can actually pick up the certifications for free. And so we encourage some of the undergrads in particular to do that because it also helps applying for the research assistant positions as well. And also for your grad school. Like if I know, rather than you saying, I know Excel or I know R, it's like, oh, you have the certificate. I know which level you know this at. It makes a big difference. Does that answer your question?
I think so. Is the program available in the spring, summer at all? I think I missed the winter deadline, but
No, it's not available in the spring, summer. If you want to shoot me an email afterwards, we do record all of these sessions as well. And I think if I look back from COVID years, I think I may actually be able to find, we recorded all of those winter sessions as well because we had to do them online. So some of it might be a little bit outdated, but the basic information will be the same. So just shoot me an email. We'll follow up.
okay, thank you.
So we are a little bit after 7:30, so I don't want to keep you guys too much longer. I do have one last question, if you don't mind. And one of the reasons I'm asking this is that I often hear, like, from especially the grad students, networking is like this scary, dangerous, intimidating word for them. And, what I have heard you guys say is that it's basically talk to people. And so I guess, if you could sort of like give any insights that you have on that might help people feel a little bit more comfortable, because you've mentioned Tisu, you've mentioned a couple other people like Maddie and Kira. I actually don't know if you guys knew that you were at the same company. I didn't realize it until I was typing in your emails last night and I was like, hey, wait a minute.
I think like I used to think it was scary when I was trying to reach out to people. Cindy might remember it when I was searching for jobs, and Jesus, Dahlia, we used to pester Cindy. Cindy put us in touch with someone, and we were like, okay, we'll just reach out cold to people. I don't know what they're going to say and whatnot. But then the more I reached out, I've realized that especially people who have been out of grad school for a few years, they're so happy to hear back from people who are in grad school. They're like, I don't know, it feels like it's a wave of memories that they start associating themselves with. They probably feel younger again. So I don't know what it is, but they're so happy usually whenever I've reached out to them. So if you reach out to your network, which definitely like not Illuminati, alumni from psych program, from your psych program, they will associate themselves with the school they have graduated from, and they almost certainly will help you, even if not like put in a referral for you, they will at least put you in the right direction, show you like which path to take and all of that. So feel free to reach out to them. They'll be like, more often than not, they'll be super happy to hear from you guys.
One of the things coming from Michigan that was fun was when I was interviewing, Kira had been at the company for a couple years. And so it was fun to sort of already like have that connection already. And because we didn't know each other in grad school, but I think, Kira, you had done either something like this that I had attended probably. And so I'd recognized your name. And so that was kind of a fun little like, oh, coming from Michigan and the PhD and then getting into um this company. It was nice to sort of feel like there was someone I could like still go to and we had some similar experiences and training and whatnot. The other side of like more general networking, our whole like job is networking, especially as we get into building our own book of clients and whatnot. Um, and it really is just talking to people and not building them up too much in your head because when we work with attorneys and they feel like this like big lofty group demographic of people. And so 3 months into my job, I went to a conference that is all just networking with attorneys, and I went with another coworker who started the same time as me. So we like did not know what we were doing. And so I was like, "What do you mean I have to talk to all these attorneys?" And it really, you just find your common ground and you run with it. I work with a lot of Ohio folks, and so the Michigan, Ohio is always a really, really safe way to go and have a little fun banter. Um, but yeah, it's you sort of find you find your common ground. You talk genuinely to people, figure out what they're interested in, and to find that common ground. And so it's really that makes it less scary. You're just talking to somebody else, trying to figure out. A lot of times, the best networking is also not even talking about your job, not talking about what you want out of the person. You want to build the relationship. And so figuring out again, common ground, and that solidifies that. And then you can sort of keep feeding it. And when you need something from them or when they need something from you, then you sort of have some foundation established already.
Yeah, like I can see a couple of names on the participants list who have been my fMRI subjects several years ago, coming to the scanner at 8 in the morning. If they are going to reach out to me, I'll be like, hell yeah, I'll help you out. So it's going to be like some form or another in which they relate to you. So don't hesitate. What's the worst that can happen? They're going to ghost you. That's it. So
Mhm. Or they say no, and then
yeah,
you're
exactly.
exactly where you began. So it doesn't, no harm, no foul.
All right. Well, again, thank you guys so much. And it was indeed wonderful to see you all again, even if Karthik did remind me that I got my PhD 24 years ago instead of 10, but that's okay. Again, thank you guys so much. And thank you to everybody in the audience too. Hope you all have a great night and a wonderful holiday too.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you all.
All right.